I'm sorry, but that's so distracting when people are whispering and all that. Do you think we could start again? Is something wrong?
Is it tough for you to protect your privacy?
Well, it's easy with the boat because you can get on the boat and within minutes, you're away and it's peaceful.
Actress Natalie Wood. Her body was found floating in the water yesterday off Santa Catalina Island in California.
In the early hours of November 29, 1981, Natalie Wood went missing from her yacht, the Splendor, which was docked here at Isthmus Cove at Two Harbors. By morning, Natalie's body would be found floating face down, less than a mile from here at Blue Cavern Point.
Right there. Yeah.
Natalie Wood was only 43 when she died, but the circumstances surrounding her death remain one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. It didn't help matters that in 2018, the police named her husband, actor Robert Wagner, a person of interest in her death.
They reopened the Natalie Wood thing. Did you ever comment on that?
No, I never did.
You wouldn't cooperate with the...
Well, I had already had.
Only 4 people know for sure what happened, and one of them's dead. 2 aren't speaking, and the 4th, well, he won't shut up. Let's go behind the sign.
Once there was a little girl named Natalie Wood.
According to the legend, when Natalie was born, her mother Maria visited a psychic. The psychic warned Maria that her precious Natalia would one day be happy, rich, and famous, but would die by drowning.
I've always been terrified, still am, of water, dark water, seawater.
Years later, she almost did drown. In 1949, Natalie starred in The Green Promise. She had to run across a rickety bridge, rigged to collapse into a torrent of water after she reached the other side. A stagehand pulled a lever prematurely, and Natalie was thrown into the rushing water below. The current pulled her under, but she managed to cling to the edge of the rocks. Maria rushed the stage, but a stagehand held her back at the director's order. That shot was ultimately used in the film. Natalie had broken her wrist in the fall, but Maria kept it a secret from production. She didn't want her daughter looking like a problem child. She didn't even take Natalie to the doctors to have it reset, and it left this large bump on her wrist. Natalie referred to it as her disfigurement. It's why she always covered up her wrist with bracelets.
Behind every child actress, I guess there's got to be a stage mother. But in my case, it was a little different. My mother didn't have to drag me into a studio by the ear. I was kind of an extroverted child who enjoyed working. I spent most of my time making movies. If I missed the fun of growing up, I didn't know about it.
Natalie had no real training. She learned how to act from the movies, watching Hollywood stars from her mother's lap. Maria used to tell Natalie that the cameraman who pointed his lens out at the audience at the end of the Paramount newsreel was taking her picture. Natalie would pose and smile like he was going to make her famous. Natalie believed everything her mother told her. Natalie made her film debut in a 15-second scene in 1943's Happy Land, directed by Irving Pitchell. And there she is. Despite the brief appearance, Pitchell wanted to adopt Natalie and make her a star. Pitchell convinced Maria to move the family from Santa Rosa, California to Los Angeles. Maria moved the family into this house behind me in West Hollywood, California. Today, the house is owned by Dolly Parton. While living here, Natalie landed her first big part in 1946's Tomorrow is Forever, alongside Orson Welles. One scene called for Natalie to sob uncontrollably. Moments before filming, Maria brought Natalie a jar with a butterfly inside. She unscrewed the lid and carefully scooped up the butterfly in her hands. Natalie's eyes lit up. Maria then proceeded to rip off the wings of the butterfly before rushing a traumatized Natalie to set.
A gun! A gun? No, Mother, it was only a snapper. Well,
I don't see why that...
Well, she asked me how it worked, and I showed her how to pull it and made a bed, and she screamed.
It was emotionally a very demanding role, and I think I went into analysis
some years later as a result of...
Yeah, I read that you were in analysis. I don't know if this is correct or not. For 8 years, 5 days a week in Freudian analysis?
Mm-hmm.
You either must really know yourself or you got robbed. which was it?
I don't know.
Did it work?
Well...
I mean, that's...
Next up, Natalie was cast in a modest holiday-themed comedy titled Only Human. The movie was later renamed Miracle on 34th Street.
I'm Santa Claus. Oh, you don't believe that, do you?
Mm-mm.
Natalie was among the top child stars in Hollywood after Miracle's release.
Did you ever believe in Santa Claus in real life?
I still do.
Around the age of 14, the movie offers slowed down. Desperate to transition to adult roles, Natalie turned to TV.
Half blue ribbon beer.
She was cast in a CBS live half-hour drama for General Electric Theater. She would star opposite an intense newcomer named James Dean.
It seems so smooth. Like we could get out in the middle of the lake and walk in the water.
She shared her first on-screen kiss with Dean. It was also her first kiss ever.
Oh, Lucy, Lucy.
Natalie would go on to kiss many boys, on and off the screen. But her boyfriends were calculated stepping stones to stardom, directed by none other than her mother Maria. Natalie lost her virginity to her first love, Jimmy Williams, who shot himself in the face with a shotgun when Natalie ended their affair after Maria excommunicated him.
I'll never get close to anybody.
I had the pleasure of working with our next guest in the motion picture called Kings Go Forth. This girl's really a great talent, and here she is. Here she is. I know we had a guest. I know it as sure as my name is Frank Sinatra, I do.
At 15, Natalie was pimped out to Frank Sinatra. The two were fascinated by each other.
How have you been, Frank?
Oh, I've been fine, honey. What's new with you?
Well, for one thing, I got married.
You did, huh?
And hear this.
It was around this time, Natalie was falling hard for her fantasy husband, matinee idol Robert Wagner. She proclaimed to her friends that she would marry the actor one day. 3 years later, she did. But more on that in a bit.
What were you and Bud doing all this time, for heaven's sake?
We were studying together.
In the years leading up to her marriage to Wagner, Natalie started to rebel against her mother's choices.
Don't you dare, Mom! Don't you dare! Don't you dare!
On at least one occasion, Natalie attempted suicide by taking sleeping pills. As a preteen, Natalie started medicating at night, unable to fall asleep on her own, haunted by the fears of being kidnapped or nightmares of drowning. Natalie hated being alone. It was around the time she started medicating that she also started drinking. Weighing 95 pounds at the age of 16, Natalie was in trouble if she consumed more than a few drinks.
I see what you mean.
Drinking would be an ongoing issue for Natalie and one of the factors in her death.
It happens wherever she goes. In Hollywood or New York, it's instant recognition. A ripple of excitement. A whispered chorus saying, "There's Natalie Wood."
By the time Natalie was 16, she had appeared in over 20 movies.
Well, Mama, look at me now. I'm a star.
By the time she was 25, she had been nominated for 3 Academy Awards.
The winners are...
Natalie's Sweet 16 was a turning point for the actress, both professionally and personally. A month after her birthday, Natalie narrowly escaped death when her car careened over an embankment. Shortly after the crash, Natalie confessed to her friend, actor Dennis Hopper, that she had been raped at the chateau by a famous married actor, 20 years her senior.
He grabbed my face, started rubbing off all the lipstick.
Months after the rape, Natalie was coerced by her mother into a sexual relationship with 42-year-old Rebel Without a Cause director Nicholas Ray. Maria had hoped this would convince Ray that Natalie could play a bad girl in Rebel.
What's the matter with you?
The affair took place at the chateau, where only months earlier Natalie had been sexually assaulted. It took another car accident before Ray cast Natalie in Rebel. A drunk Dennis Hopper was driving Natalie down Laurel Canyon Boulevard when they crashed. At the hospital, Natalie called Ray. When Ray arrived, the doctor informed him that Natalie was a
goddamn juvenile delinquent.
He doesn't like nothing about me.
Natalie shot back at Ray. Now do I get the part?
Girls don't love their father. Since when?
since I got to be 16.
Stop that!
Natalie transformed the character of Judy from a trashy teen to a confused, hurt kid yearning for acceptance, much like herself.
Everything going okay now?
Her performance earned her her first Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress.
Who lives?
At the time, Rebel was a groundbreaking portrayal of American youth, as well as a critique of parental style, exploring the conflicts between generations.
He called me a dirty tramp. My own father.
Over the decades, the film has achieved legendary status due to the premature deaths of its stars.
Hit your lights!
James Dean, Natalie Wood, Sal Mineo, and Nick Adams would each pass away before the age of 45, all of them under tragic or mysterious circumstances. This has led some fans to believe that Rebel was cursed. Around 3:30 p.m. on September 30th, 1955, James Dean signed his last autograph when he was ticketed for speeding in his Porsche Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard. Not long after, Dean collided with a black and white 1950 Ford two-door. Dean was killed instantly at the age of 24.
I think I'd better take off.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. More question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. The life you might save might be mine.
The curse would next take the life of actor Nick Adams. Adams had a small role in Rebel, playing Chick. Adams died from a prescription drug overdose at the age of 36. His widely publicized friendships with Dean and Elvis Presley stirred up speculation about both his private life and the circumstances around his death. Friends believed that he had trouble coming to terms with his sexuality. Unlike Adams, Sal Mineo embraced his sexuality by coming out as a bisexual in a groundbreaking 1972 interview. Sal played John Plato Crawford in Rebel, the sensitive teenager smitten with Dean's character. In 1975, Sal was returning home from play rehearsals when he was stabbed once in the heart in the back alley of his apartment building in a robbery gone wrong. He died almost immediately.
I've always been terrified, still am, of water, dark water.
Well, let's go, Catalina.
6 years after Sal's murder, Natalie would meet her untimely fate on Catalina Island. Who hasn't been tempted by Catalina? I know I have. I have so many memories on Catalina. I brought my mom to Lloyd's before she died. What I remember most from that trip was eating taffy from Lloyd's on the beach with her. Marilyn Monroe worked here when she lived on Catalina. She was the taffy puller.
That is so...
Yeah, see, there you go. On that trip, I went to the Before She Was Marilyn exhibition at the Catalina Museum, which used to be housed here at the Catalina Casino. I was surprised to find out that Marilyn Monroe called Catalina home for a year and a half. I'm sitting in the exact same spot where Marilyn Monroe sat when she was living in Catalina. In 1942, 16-year-old Norma Jean Baker married 21-year-old James Daughtry, a merchant marine soon to be stationed on Santa Catalina Island. It was either Catalina or another orphanage for Norma Jean. The newlyweds moved into the White House apartment building behind me, in a third-floor, one-bedroom apartment. It looks a lot like the orphanage Norma Jean was trying to run away from. Historians, for the most part, ignore this part of Marilyn's life. I don't know why. Because Catalina is where Norma Jean discovered Marilyn Monroe. So Marilyn learned her walk on Catalina in front of the sailors and the medics down on the shore, and her husband would mention that she could just turn it on like that. He'd never seen anything like it. Catalina isn't the only connection these two icons share. They're both buried here at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park and Mortuary. They also had small parts in the 1948 film Scudda Who, Scudda Hey.
Go wait in the car. Hi, Red. Hi, Betty.
While Marilyn's grave is usually covered in lipstick marks and memorabilia, Natalie's remains bare. this is completely out there, but some fans are convinced that Robert Wagner was so jealous of his wife's popularity, even in death, he had her grave stripped of flowers and mementos left by fans. Sounds crazy, but fans have returned to Natalie's grave to find their tributes trash, and they even have photos to back it up. It's only added fuel to the theory that Wagner was somehow involved in his wife's death. Do you want a Ritz? Do you want a Ritz or some turkey? On the day Natalie turned 18, she went on her first date with
Robert Wagner,
or RJ as his family and friends call him. They married 3 weeks after he proposed to Natalie. For the first time in her life, Natalie was free of her mother's control.
This is Natalie Wood. Maybe you don't recognize her.
Oh, yes.
That's probably because you've never seen her like this before.
Please be.
After appearing alongside RJ in the ill-fated All the Fine Young Cannibals, Natalie pinned her hopes on 1961's Splendor in the Grass.
Forget the ideals of youth.
Natalie was nominated for a second Academy Award for her performance in Splendor. That same year, Natalie starred as Maria in the iconic movie musical West Side Story. So what if she wasn't Puerto Rican?
My mother and father are at this door.
Unbeknownst to Natalie, ghost singer Marnie Nixon redubbed her vocals. Natalie found out at the premiere.
I feel pretty and witty and gay.
It was around this time Natalie and RJ divorced.
Why?
Rumors circulated that she had walked in on RJ with another man.
I think you're a louse.
Decades later, this was all but confirmed by Natalie's biographer, Susanna Finstad.
It's fascinating.
Despite the turmoil in her private life, Natalie's career continued to soar when she earned her 3rd Academy Award nomination for her role in Love with the Proper Stranger. She next starred in the musical Gypsy. This time, it was Natalie's voice.
Let me entertain you.
So far removed from what we really are, from what we really feel, from what we really do.
After Gypsy, Natalie went into semi-retirement with the birth of her first child, with her second husband, Richard Gregson. Her next 2 movies bombed at the box office. By the mid-70s, Natalie's once dazzling and decade-spanning career was evaporating before her eyes, along with her second marriage. In 1972, Natalie remarried RJ on their friend's yacht. When the couple returned from their honeymoon, RJ bought a yacht and christened it Splendor after Natalie's Splendor in the Grass. They named the small attached dinghy Valiant after RJ's bomb of a movie, Prince Valiant. Natalie would ultimately meet her demise on Splendor, but for the last 1.5 years of her life, it was Natalie's floating sanctuary.
Robert Wagner and Natalie Wood, how about that? They got divorced and they got back together.
And then she slipped off the boat and died.
It was an accident.
And Christopher Walken, how do you explain that?
I don't know what he was doing on the boat.
I want to die. I'm sorry I've troubled you. I didn't want to worry you. I didn't want to worry anyone.
Natalie Wood, dead now at the age of 43.
The last 36 hours of Natalie's life consisted of an alcohol-charged chain of circumstances building to a tragic yet avoidable climax, the details of which remain as murky as the dark seawater Natalie believed would eventually take her life. When Natalie walked out the front door of her house for a Thanksgiving weekend on Catalina, her daughter Natasha begged her not to go. RJ had to pry Natasha off her mother. Natalie was disturbed by her daughter's reaction. She was really looking forward to a nice, relaxing weekend on Catalina. Staying on the boat that weekend would be Natalie, RJ, Natalie's co-star in Brainstorm, Christopher Walken, and the boat's captain, Dennis Davern.
Weather started getting rough. The tiny ship was tossed.
The weather was horrible when the foursome set sail for Catalina the day after Thanksgiving on November 27, 1981. Captain Davern tried numerous times to dissuade Natalie from setting sail. The stormy crossing to Catalina that Friday afternoon was the first sign of trouble. Another kind of storm was brewing inside the cabin. RJ's jealousy was on full display the moment Christopher Walken came aboard. Natalie had invited Walken in part to demonstrate to a suspicious RJ that nothing was going on between them.
I'm crazy about you.
It's a secret. That's the girl I'm gonna marry. When the group arrived here at Avalon Bay, the drinking on the boat started right away. Natalie was mixing drinks, and RJ popped open a bottle of wine. Around 5 p.m., Natalie, RJ, and Walken went ashore, leaving Danvern behind to prepare dinner. The trio drank beers and margaritas well into the evening here at the beachfront restaurant El Galeon. El Galeon is one of Catalina's oldest and most beloved restaurants. It's where Natalie and RJ celebrated one of their wedding anniversaries. Cheers to Natalie. The manager of El Galeon remembered the trio leaving for the dock around 10 p.m. They had been consuming alcohol for 10 hours by this point. 10 hours! I'm wasted, and I've only been drinking for an hour. Back at the dock, Natalie wouldn't get into the dinghy. It was cold and dark out. She was drunk and anxious about sailing off into the darkness. RJ somehow managed to calm her down and get her into the dinghy. Once back on the Splendor, the group continued drinking. Christopher Walken retired early to bed. 10+ hours of drinking and seasickness can have that effect on a person. What happened next would set the stage for the disturbing events which would lead to Natalie's biggest fear coming true. According to the captain, a fight between Natalie and RJ created an unbearable tension aboard the Splendor. She demanded that Danvern take her ashore. In RJ's first police interview, he said nothing of that Friday night fight. So Natalie had the captain drive her back to shore in the Valiant. And once back on shore, Natalie and the captain went to El Galeon again. Natalie has the bartender make her reservations at the Pavilion Lodge, which is just over your shoulder, right over there. And while they're waiting on the bartender to make these reservations, Natalie and the captain have more drinks. So they're going on like hour 11 of drinking. And when they get to their rooms, they continue drinking for another 2 to 3 hours. Natalie had the bartender book her 2 rooms at the Pavilion Lodge, room 126 and room 219. They never saw the second room. The captain stayed with Natalie all night. Supposing nothing happened, they just talked and drank some more. Natalie was terrified of being alone. It's now Saturday morning, and the captain has convinced Natalie to go back to the Splendor in hopes of diffusing an already tense situation. By the time RJ wakes up, Natalie's mood had shifted drastically. She was even making her famous huevos rancheros. Everyone acted as though nothing had happened the night before. The group dropped their plans to return to the mainland and instead decided to ride out the rough waters at Two Harbors, a remote fishing village on the other side of Catalina. Natalie and the group arrived at Two Harbors around 11:30 a.m. on November 28. The harbor master assigned a mooring number N1, about 100 yards from shore. The weather took a turn for the worse, so the group drank aboard the Splendor most of the afternoon. RJ passed out, and Natalie and Walken took the Valiant ashore, leaving RJ a note. The co-stars drank at the bar at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant. Outside, the weather was getting worse, but inside, Natalie and Walken were in a bubble, resuming their playfulness from the Brainstorm set. Natalie had a couple scenes left to shoot once they returned from Catalina. RJ woke up from his nap on the boat, irritated that his wife had gone off with Walken. When they failed to return, RJ had the captain take him ashore. He finds the charismatic co-stars having a fabulous time at the bar at Doug's. Natalie's already pretty drunk, and she'll continue to drink for the next 6 hours. If you can't beat them, you might as well join them. RJ made dinner reservations for 7 p.m. in the dining room. The foursome sat at the bar for the next 3 hours as a storm raged outside and one brewed inside. The captain noticed a jealous rage simmering in RJ. RJ felt like the odd man out.
I hate people who have to drink.
By the time the foursome sat down for dinner in the adjoining dining room, they were already wasted. Their waitress noticed Natalie's mood shift. She sent her meal back, saying that she would drink her dinner.
I think you better go on drinking, and I think I better go on drinking too.
The waitress also swore she saw Natalie and Walken holding hands under the table. The host of the restaurant told police that he saw RJ and Walken flirting with each other, and even a little touching going on between the two men. The 3-hour dinner consisted of 2 bottles of wine, 2 bottles of champagne, cocktails sent over by starstruck fellow diners, daiquiris ordered by walk-in, and cognac for RJ and the captain. At one point, Natalie disappeared into the restroom. The waitress found Natalie brushing the hair of a 9-year-old girl and telling her how important it was to have a childhood.
Have you seen my childhood?
Back at the table, an accordion player played Laura's theme from Dr. Zhivago. Sometime afterward, Natalie threw a wine glass at the wall next to RJ. The tension escalated to a crescendo around 10 p.m. when RJ got up to leave. Their waitress was so worried about how drunk the group was, she phoned the harbor master. The harbor master saw Natalie and the group get into the dinghy, and he heard Natalie scream. A shore boat driver actually saw Natalie stumble into the dinghy.
It takes a while, like anything else, and then you feel comfortable, even when you have to do scenes in a tank full of water.
Back aboard the Splendor, RJ was about to explode.
Stop! Don't you say it!
Walken later admitted to police that he and RJ had gotten into a small beef soon after returning. This seemed to disturb Natalie.
And I want them to stop behaving like mice and start behaving like men!
RJ was complaining that Natalie was away from home too much. She was away from the kids and it was hurting their home life. Walken sided with Natalie, so RJ smashed a wine bottle and said to Walken, "What do you want to do?"
Fuck my wife.
That's the first time I've heard you raise your voice in a long time.
Walken stepped out onto the freezing deck for some air, hoping to bring down the temperature inside the Splendor. Below deck, things were heating up even more.
Drops his eyes down to my boobs and licks his old chops.
That kind of talk is disgusting.
I'm not trying to whitewash my behavior. God knows, Brick, I'm not good. But I'm honest. Give me credit for just that, will you please? And Brick, Skipper is dead. I'm alive. Maggie the cat is alive. I'm alive.
When Walken returned around 10:30, Natalie had already turned in for the night.
All of you have been behaving like a bunch of pompous children.
Natalie would not be seen alive again. Within 45 minutes to an hour of Natalie retreating to her stateroom, she went missing from the Splendor. Shortly after 11 p.m., John Payne, the owner of a boat called the Capricorn, moored approximately 80 feet from the Splendor, thought he heard a woman crying for help.
I can't see a thing.
Payne turned on the top light atop the mast and scanned the dark water. He didn't see anything, and the woman's cry stopped around 11:30.
She's not yelling anymore, Mom.
RJ would not report Natalie missing from the Splendor until 1:30 in the morning. RJ thought Natalie had gone back to Doug's to drink at the bar. RJ was distraught and extremely panicky when the search at 2 harbors turned up empty. RJ and the captain both asked the harbor master not to contact the Coast Guard right away. They wanted to keep the search low-key. It would be another 6 hours after Natalie went missing that the Coast Guard was finally initiated. Around 6 a.m., the manager and cook of Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant discovered the dinghy tangled in kelp inside a small cave at Blue Cavern Point, where it had drifted about 1¼ miles northeast of the Isthmus Pier. Natalie was nowhere to be found. The key was turned off in neutral, with its oars still in place, suggesting that Natalie had never been in the dinghy. The discovery of the dinghy at 5:30 a.m. with no Natalie was an almost certain indication that her worst fear had come true. The owner of Doug's, who had joined the search for Natalie, spotted something red near the waters of Blue Cavern Point. It was Natalie. Her red nightgown had ballooned, acting as sort of a life preserver. Sadly, it was no lifesaver. The red nightgown had become Natalie's tomb. And so she floated out to sea from that mooring around Blue Cavern Point into those caves over there.
Actress Natalie Wood is dead at 43, the apparent victim of a drowning accident off Santa Catalina Island in California.
There were new developments today in the mystery surrounding the death of Natalie Wood.
The coroner's office said today that actress Natalie Wood was intoxicated and angry after an argument between her husband and actor Christopher Walken.
What was going through Natalie's mind as she drifted further and further away? Based on the amount of ocean water in her lungs, Natalie had remained alive for at least an hour in the water. All her life, she was told over and over again that she would drown one day. The psychic's prediction was actually coming true. and there was nothing she could do about it. No director yelling cut, no mother rushing to her aid, just dark seawater all around her. But the question remains, even to this day, how did Natalie end up in the sea that night?
The coroner's autopsy indicated Miss Wood had died by accident.
Shortly after midnight of the Sunday morning, she apparently attempted to get on to the dinghy, slipped and fell in the water, unable to return to the dinghy or the boat.
Got the report just now. It didn't surprise me, baby.
RJ had his own theory. Natalie wasn't trying to separate herself from the group, an accusation leveled by the coroner. Instead, Natalie slipped trying to tie up the dinghy, which had become loose and was knocking up against their stateroom.
She would have had to go out of to get to the dive step, which is right here. And the dinghy, supposedly, was tied up here.
When she slipped, Natalie grabbed onto the dinghy, but weighed down by her wool nightgown, kept pushing it further out to sea as she grabbed at it. She held on as long as she could.
Dennis, what happened that night? Was there an argument on the yacht?
That was the mainstream thinking until 30 years later when the captain started giving interviews to anyone who would listen. His version of events that night? After Natalie retired to her cabin, she returned and continued fighting with RJ on the deck. The next thing the captain knew, RJ had pushed Natalie overboard.
The argument got out of control. She was knocked unconscious by a physical fight from Robert Wagner and put in the water.
Less than 2 weeks after Natalie drowned, the LA County Sheriff's Department closed the case, calling Natalie's death an accidental drowning. Natalie's funeral was held on December 2nd, 1981 at Pierce Brothers.
I sort of felt like everything was taken away from me.
In 2011, the Sheriff's Department reopened the death investigation and amended Natalie's death certificate to drowning and other undetermined factors. In 2018, RJ was named a person of interest in the investigation.
RJ, I just wanted to ask you one thing. I'm really sorry. I know the pain that you're going through and that I'm going through. You know, I know this has not been any easier for you. Everybody knows. Why won't you speak to the detectives? They're super guys. Clear yourself if you can.
Why would you even bring up anything like that?
Because I'm hounded with it every single day.
Do you realize what you've done?
No, what have I done? What,
Who's
can they go away? I don't know.
I have talked to everybody. Accuse me of murdering her.
The real story of her death is that she drowned. And nobody knows how she drowned or what happened except her.
Move over stars and give me some skies. I've got me some wings I'm eager to try. Pardon my hate, I've no time to wait. You're gonna hear from me. Heaven smile from the blue above me.
And it pleases me so much that this time it's meant for me. It's a great honor. Thank you with all my heart.
Exactly.